everybody, to the Agewise Podcast, where we bring you guys thought-leading conversations about independence and what it truly means to age in place on your own terms. I'm your host, Paul Bastante, and there is literally nowhere else in the entire world that I'd rather be than right here, coming to all of you from ANJ Studios right here in beautiful Pompton Plains, New Jersey. On the other side of the glass is Santiago, the Agewise Podcast producer. How are you today, Santiago?
I'm doing well, Paul.
Good. Glad to see you again. It's been a little time since we spent time in the room here today.
It has been a little bit, but you know what? It's a new year and new things are happening.
Absolutely. Let's get it. 2026. So again, I'm Paul Bastante. I'm a certified aging in place specialist, and I'm someone who believes deeply that growing older should never mean giving up control, comfort, your independence, or your dignity. And this podcast is brought to you first and foremost by 101 Mobility North Jersey. They help families and individuals create safer, more accessible homes every single day in the North Jersey market. 101 Mobility North Jersey treats all of their customers with both dignity and respect, which means that they'll treat your patients with the same dignity and respect. If you or someone you love is looking to age in place with confidence, you can reach 101 Mobility North Jersey directly at 973-658-5100. Now, here's the truth. Aging, it isn't the problem. The way we think about aging, well, that's where things get dicey. And that's exactly why I wanted our very first guest on the Agewise Podcast to be someone who's been challenging those ideas on a global level for basically an entire lifetime. And so today, I'm very pleased to be joined by one of the most foremost authorities on aging and ageism, our special guest for the very first Agewise Podcast. And Santiago, this is our maiden voyage. This is the first one, but it doesn't mean this is our first time at the rodeo, right? We've been doing this for a long time. I could not be more excited to be here with the Agewise Podcast and kick it off in a very special way. And it's kind of like, when you have something that you're really passionate about and that person who is like the leading authority in it, you get to interview that person. So when I woke up today, I was like, what? I get to do this? This is great. Our guest is an internationally recognized author, activist, and a thought leader in the movement to end ageism, Ashton Applewhite. She's the author of the groundbreaking book, This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism. It's a book that sparked so much conversation across generations and across the world. She's also the co-founder of the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse, a widely respected resource dedicated to dismantling harmful stereotypes around aging. Through her writing, speaking, and advocacy, Ashton's made it her mission to shift the narrative, to help people understand that aging is not a decline to be feared, but a natural, powerful, and meaningful stage of life. Her work challenges all of us, including professionals like myself, caregivers in the field, working with patients and physical therapists and social workers in rehab settings, and to rethink how we talk about aging, how we design for it, and most importantly, how we respect it. And I can tell you, this is a conversation that matters because if we get it right, we don't just improve lives, but we change the entire experience of growing older. And as we've all come to understand, it's one of the things that all of us, and I mean all of us, and it's not just hyperbole, every single one of us, we are all aging. We share this. And so let's get into it. Welcome to the program, Ashton. How are you today? It's so great to see you.
I'm fine. I can just see the sad faces like we are all aging. Oh my God, like that's terrible and depressing. But another way to think about that is that to live is to age. And to age is to live. We are aging from the minute we are born. I just put up on my Instagram a photograph of my first granddaughter who is now, she just turned 16. So old enough to give consent for a picture of her not wearing a lot of clothes as practically a newborn, smiling. And it says in big red letters, this person is aging. So remember, children are aging too. We're all on this journey. We're just at different stages in it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And we do have it all in common. And, the fact is that each of us will wake up tomorrow one day older than we are right now. And so it really
if
is.
We're lucky.
And if we're lucky, correct. Knock on wood. Okay, knock on wood. Absolutely. And it's definitely, like I said before, too, it's like counterintuitive. You would think it opposite, maybe sometimes. We prepare financially for aging more than we emotionally plan. Yes or no?
I have no idea.
So you have financial, we all prepare it. Like, I think that the emphasis is always
honestly,
on.
we're shit at both.
I can see that too. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Santiago,
I mean,
too?
Human species are not good at preparing for the future. That's just a sad attribute of our species. If I had to put money on it, I'd say we're better at planning logistically and financially than psychologically and emotionally.
Well, don't we always neglect our own self when we talk about the health part of it? I feel like that's part of this as well in terms of how self-aware, how we view ourselves, our self-view. Is money the biggest barrier to aging in place? Yes or no?
No.
Younger people fear aging more than they understand it. Yes or no?
Probably.
And intergenerational relationships.
I mean, I'd go with the same answer for old people.
Yes. Again, because that's going to be a common theme that's going to really kind of worm its way through our entire podcast today, is that the spectrum.
I have a phrase in my book that I appropriated from a geriatrician named Joanne Lynn, who, this was ages ago before I really knew what I was doing, but she described herself as an old person in training. And I went, oh, I'm not sure what that means, but that's what I have become. The earlier in life you become an old person in training, which is simply like not a trick, but it's simply the acknowledgement that you, if you are lucky, will someday get old. That makes you an old person in training. It forms a connection, emotional, psychological, maybe logistical, to your future older self, who can be a speck on a distant horizon. But if this earlier in life, we make that connection and acknowledge that we are, in fact, getting old, probably going to be old, the less likely we are to slip into this trap of denial and it's never going to happen to me, and so on. So that can happen when you're young. It happens with, a lot of younger people who live with grandparents or have contact with older people, are old people in training, when we live in such an age segregated society that if you don't have day-to-day relationships with people of all ages, it's easier to stay in that silo, and that silo is not our friend.
It is most certainly not our friend. And also another thing that may not be our friend is social media. Is social media helping to reduce ageism? Yes or no?
Depends. I mean, there's a lot of older people on social media, and it's accessible to people with disabilities who cannot necessarily, get on a plane or travel somewhere. So it is democratizing. I would never have set up the base that I have without the internet and social media, but it depends on who we listen to and watch, and how we educate ourselves about the whole kit and caboodle.
Ashton, we mentioned at the top that you're a writer, and the book that we're talking about today is called This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism. It's a book that we said, and I've noticed has sparked so much conversation across generations, across the world. Tell us a little bit about the book. It's almost like asking Led Zeppelin to play Stairway to Heaven. You're at the concert, play Stairway to Heaven. But you know what? You wrote the book in 2016. Tell us about it. Give us a little context.
Well, I wrote a book because I had written another serious book almost 20 years before that, and it was honestly the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And when I started getting interested in aging and ageism, I thought, well, thank God I'll never have to write another book. I'll just tweet. That was back when Twitter was Twitter, and blog. And that was back when blogging was something people did instead of Substack. And I'll never have to write another book, but I did have to, and I'm glad I did, because things change when you write a book. I would urge people to, of course, the thing I love best when people say about the book is that it is fun to read. It sounds like a lot of fiber, and there's a lot of stuff in it, but I do write like I speak, partly because I read what I write aloud and make sure no jargon. And it's available in all. It's not free. I go to huge efforts to provide free access to everything I've written and thought. I've been thinking out loud about this since 2005 at thischairrocks.com/blog. The book is not free. You can download the first chapter free on Kindle. And the audiobook is read by me. And if you cannot afford a copy, email me and I will email you a PDF of it for free. I guarantee that it will change the way you think about the years ahead. And because it will not only affect the way you think about your own aging, that's internalized ageism or self-directed bias, and we all have it in us. It's the waters we have swum in since we were kids, but also the external structural systemic forces that want you to fear aging and that want you to be divided from people of different ages. And that's the part that gets my my backup, I guess, for, as an activist, that's the part that I want to work to change the whole thing. But we have to start, of course, with what's between our ears.
Absolutely. And I'm going to give you one word right now, and I would like you to react exactly how you would react. The word, it's a 3-letter word. It's a little word, and it is old. Go ahead, Ashton.
I don't know if you've watched my TED Talk. Oh, that's really good, and it's free. By the way, if you want to crash course, it's 11 minutes, and it does explain why this topic matters so much, especially in a world where everyone everywhere is living longer. And the very first slide has the word old in huge letters, because I want to do what you're doing, which is to put it out there and to think about what your reaction is to that word. And for most of us, it's oh crap, let's talk about anything else. Let's pretend that this isn't happening. And ageism, which is any judgment or assumption on the basis of how old we think someone is or a group of people are. Ageism sinks its claws into us when we refuse, when we deny that it's going to happen to us. And guilty. We're all, no judgment around any of this. I mean, I got started on this because I looked in the mirror in my mid-50s, which is now 20 years ago, and went, oh, it's happening to me. What the hell? And there's ageism in that for sure, that it's something that I wanted to keep at a distance. But I think it's also a little bit just human. We age slowly. When you're a kid, you can't believe that people are sitting in chairs when they could be running around. And it's, as I've already mentioned, we're not good as a species at envisioning our future. So the more we can look at old as a neutral word, old, we like old furniture, we like old cheese, and old should not be a word with positive or negative assumptions. Old means having been around a long time. And when it comes to a rusting iron bridge, not so great. But when it comes to other things, including human beings, it's neutral or a positive, right? So let's look at a sort of litmus test to think about whether a thought or something you heard or perhaps said or did is ageist. Does it assign a value? Are we saying more typically that older is worse, less valuable, less legit, less insert positive whatever, less desirable than youth?
Yeah, and you might substitute the word lucky for old, right?
Lucky is really... Lucky is so important. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, Paul, because I think you mentioned in your introduction wanting to age on your own terms and not give up control. At the risk of irritating you, I think that luck plays a huge role, which I know you don't disagree with. Of course, we're lucky to have the resources that I'm assuming we both have and, have education. That's luck. That's an accident of birth. I think that as we age, the way we age is subject to a whole host of variables that we do not control. We don't control our temperament. I don't think. I think that happens when the sperm hits the egg. We don't control if we live in a country where war has broken out and we cannot get away. And we can control a lot of aspects of our health, but not others. So I think the one thing I know that we can control is our attitudes. And that's why it's so important to have conversations like these. And I think let go of the idea that we can control everything. And because I think especially in the United States, and especially, there is this, you see it as an extreme among the tech bros who actually think that they can live forever. I call them the immortalists. And that is a hubristic delusion to which they are welcome. I don't really want to waste any more breath on them, but but one thing we can control is our attitudes. And it is not easy to change entrenched habits of thinking. That's what bias is. Most bias is unconscious, so we're not even aware of it. So it's a big ask to say, hey, when you see that word old, right now, what does it make you feel? And then let's go into that. Why do you feel that? And what are the forces that are feeding that feeling? But I can tell you that changing your attitude is doable. Not that, still sometimes you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you go, what the hell happens? Or everything hurts. I'm not like Miss Pollyanna here that just, put a smile on your face and it's all going to be nifty because hello, luck. Right?
Yeah.
And can you take care of yourself? It's social connection, most important thing, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really important to acknowledge luck, good and bad, because we age well by adapting to circumstances, not by pretending that we can control them.
And when you said the aches and pains or the physical, the aging, I looked back there in Santiago. I was like, oh hell yes, that's what's
real.
up, right? That's what's up. Yeah, and Santiago, Ashton also said I'm educated and smart. Did you hear her?
I did. I heard the
That's
compliment.
really cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. So Ashton, you wrote the book in 2016, right? So it's 10 years later, 2026, right? Where are we at right now? What's changed?
Well, when I started out on this self-appointed mission, I ran into people all the time who did not know what ageism was. They had never heard the word. And for sure, that has changed. And that is the most, it's abstract. It's not, you can't say, well, that has saved us X million dollars in this quadrant. But all change starts with awareness. You can't combat a problem that you're not aware of. And as I already mentioned, most bias is unconscious. So the fact that a lot of people now know what it is, it has prompted this sort of, I won't call it a backlash, but especially during COVID when older people died in huge numbers. A lot of people started talking about ageism. I'm just going to put a footnote there. We died in larger numbers for the unavoidable reason that we were biologically more vulnerable. But also we died in huge numbers because older people and disabled people, which there's some overlap, but it is also two different communities, were ignored and abandoned. And that's political. So there's two reasons. When especially when COVID happened, there was a lot of talk about ageism getting worse, and there still is. I will maintain also Joe Biden, the way he was forced to leave office. That sparked a ton of conversation about him being too old for office. Air quotes around too old, because you're never too old. You might be too lazy. You might be too smart. You might be not legally entitled to something, but it's never about age. I think all this conversation around age has lifted the bar, has educated people about what ageism is, and that is a critical first step in acknowledging the problem and then recognizing it and then addressing it in yourselves and in the culture. And I also, you mentioned an organization that I co-founded called Old School. It is now the Old School Hub. website, oldschool.info. I make $0 off it, but it is a place to find curated resources about ageism. I thought this movement is early. What if we could find all the good stuff in one place? Everything is free except the books. And we also host meetups, free virtual get-togethers. So if you want to meet other people who are interested in this stuff or just lurk or whatever, Old School provides that. When we started Old School, we didn't even have a campaigns section. The resources are categorized. And now when I last counted, there were over 30 anti-ageism campaigns, not campaigns on how to live forever, not campaigns on how to age-proof your home, which is important too. Campaigns on age bias, what it is, how to recognize it, how to undo it. And that is progress. So I think we are making big progress. I also think that in these particularly, upheaval-y times, that I see more solidarity between old and young around the need to join forces around climate change, around the huge disruption that AI is already provoking in the workforce, and so on. So granted, that's abstract, probably not many people thinking about it at that level unless they do what I do for a living, but I also see that as a positive trend.
Would you say, even though that ageism is really the last, I think of a good way to put this, is the last maybe socially acceptable form of bias and of discrimination? Would that be a true statement to say?
It gets a lot of press because it's a catchy idea. And I would absolutely say in a nerdier way that ageism is the least examined form of bias. We know, I think that's one reason I've had the recognition that I have had is I sort of got there first, and that there's a lot of aha ideas that are available to anyone who thinks hard about this stuff, but not that many people have yet. And I will also say that's what makes it so interesting. It gets more interesting all the time, and I bet you will agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it is, in that sense, we are less aware of it as a society, but two things. It's a fool's game to compare any form of bias because they are all intertwined systems that build on and reinforce each other. And secondly, they're all bad. And we haven't made anywhere near the progress we need to make, especially in the United States, especially against racism, in my opinion. So I don't say anymore it's socially acceptable because the fact is they're all more acceptable than they should be. And we need to think of the effort to undo them as a unified, again, the opposite of zero sum. When you chip away at the fear and ignorance that underlies any kind of prejudice, you chip away at them all. It is the opposite of zero sum.
I tend to agree with you. And, I think it's becoming less and less of the last forms of, bias as it becomes more familiar. And there are people like you in the world and other anti-ageism movements who, are doing the job and doing the work for it.
I'm glad to hear that.
To introduce. So we're going to take a break. On the other side, I want to ask Ashton about a TED Talk, if it's all that she thought it would be when she did it. And you know what? Just the fact that you did it, you're my idol. We're going to hear about that after this. Let's talk about something a lot of families don't realize when they're looking for stair lifts or ramps, and that's renting to own. It sounds great, right? Rent it now, apply what you've paid towards owning it later. But here's the catch. Not every company plays fair. Some places will rent you a used unit, but charge you toward the price of a brand new one. You think you're getting credit towards ownership, but really you're paying for new product pricing for used equipment. And that's not okay. At 101 Mobility North Jersey, we don't do that, ever. We tell you exactly what's being installed, what condition it's in, and exactly how your payments will work. No tricks, no fine print, just transparency, the way it should be. Because when it comes to your home, your safety, and your trust, there's no substitute for honesty. Call us today, 973-658-5100. something that really wasn't on my radar. I'll be honest about it. So there might be a certain type of variance there when it comes to me. And when I took this position and started working with people who, were in this crisis mode of life and, aging in place and all of these things, I start to say to myself, there's something there. I feel like I'm almost like been put here for a reason, like to learn about the future of myself and how it affects me in the world, like little old me in the world, the discrimination of jobs. I mean, I'm an old head, Bad Bunny told me, do you know who Bad Bunny is?
Of course.
Okay, so I didn't, and I was in the car, and I do some acting, Ashton.
Not of course, that was snippy. Sorry, yes, I do.
I was in a no, it wasn't. It was not. You could not be snippy. I was in this music video, and I show up, and I'm in a taxi cab, and as soon as I got to the show, it was the set. It was 4 a.m. I was in the Bronx outside of a bodega, and all of a sudden, the guys came out and they started decorating the cab with Puerto Rican flags and Puerto Rican colors and the whole thing. And I said to the gentleman, I said, who is the artist? And he said, Bad Bunny. And I said, Bad Bunny? Wow, okay. And then, he scurried off, and I texted my fiance. And I said, who the hell is Bad Bunny?
Who the heck is Bad Bunny?
I had no idea, So I was basically in a cab with him for 15 minutes every time they reset the shot. And we did about 15 shots. So while we were in the cab, I said to him, I said, Mr. Bunny. He said, call me Bad. I said, well, that's awkward, but that's a whole other issue. And I said, I hadn't never heard of you before today. And he said, that's because you're an old head. Which, interestingly enough, is what my kids call me sometimes as well. So this is all to say, and to go a long way around, that it kind of hit me on the side of the head as I was walking down the street about ageism and the implications of it and why it is problematic. And ever since that time, I've noticed more and more and more stuff and more
once you start to
attention.
see it, you see it in the world, and that's liberating.
Yeah, it's like when you own a Jeep sometimes, right? You drive in and they beep when you're driving past another Jeep, you wave, right? Now it's like, oh, every time you hear something about it, you're like, hey, that's me. That's me. And I can't think of a better and more relevant thing in my life to know about. I think more people should want to, especially as we age. I mean, I know it's
because
a whole
the more
spectrum.
you know, the better you feel. I mean, I think that's. I think that's
people
think the more they know, it's going to be depressing or sad, and it's the opposite. I did want to mention, Paul, and you may or may not want to go there. It gets nerdy if you talk about ageism and ableism, which I would define. But I just wrote a newsletter, 6 weeks or so ago. I don't write them very often, about starting to use a cane preventatively. And it got a lot of pickup. And it is also just astonishing. It's not astonishing how reluctant and terrified and averse people are to anything that signifies disability.
I had this conversation that you bring up on the way into work today at the big podcast here. My fiance is a social worker, and she's a discharge planner. Okay, in a rehab unit, a pretty popular one of the only ones in Passaic County. I don't want to say the name. She was recently kind of attacked by one of the patients because she brought resource information, to that person. Okay, so the person's in the hospital, they're triaged, they're in bad shape. The family now is set up to be caregiver, and they sit down with the social worker, and the social worker says to them, there's a resource A or resource B, right? And the reason I tell you is because she just brought it up to me because those people complained hard and loud, and they were offended that somebody would mention to them, that these type of things, like just as simple as what you said. By these
type of things, do we mean like a wheelchair?
Cane, a stair lift, an elevator. All right. Okay. So tell me.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be snarky. I mean,
no.
So someone in my family, she just moved. She lives with her daughter. She's a little bit older than I am, just in her early 80s. They moved to a house in a new city. They installed an elevator, which her daughter, my stepdaughter, was not thrilled about because she said, Mom can go up and down the stairs and it's good for her to do so. Leaving that aside, and I said nothing to anyone, it's not my business, but they spent a lot of money to put in an elevator. Punchline, the elevator is too small for a wheelchair. That is denial. That is really expensive, dumb denial, in my opinion. There a lot of what we think of is ageism, is anxiety and apprehension and stigma around how our minds and bodies may change. And that is ableism, right? Discrimination on the basis of physical or cognitive ability. And of course, it intersects with aging because as we age, our bodies work less well. That is real. You are not going to catch me saying, do enough sit-ups or eat enough kale and it'll all be nifty and you'll jump rope to your funeral. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. It's again, hostage to a lot of things that you do not control. But you see it really fiercely when it comes to anything around disability, around age-proofing your home. I encountered this. I did battle with myself, I have to say, because my husband, who will turn 80 next month, is now on medication that increases his risk of osteoporosis. And he's also a hypochondriac and hypervigilant about his health, who worries about everything, which I tend not to do. And we said, what are we waiting for? Why don't we start using canes so that we reduce our fall risk? Because we all know that falls often set off a cavalcade of physical and psychological and logistical challenges that, shorten lives. And so we got canes and he was out the door. He practically sleeps with his. It took me a couple of weeks, even me, which I say, because even though I've done all the thinking I have done on this, I found myself thinking, I'll just wait until the day when I would have fallen if I hadn't used it, which is, of course, completely irrational. And that day, I had to realize, I am ready to be that old person with a cane because I don't have a vestibular nerve on this side. I'm deaf on one side. And my balance, I can stand fine. I can stand steady as a rock. I can walk without leaning on a cane, but my balance is not as good as it used to be. And what are we waiting for? I got tons of response to this newsletter. It's up on my blog for anyone who wants to see it, thischairrocks.com/blog. And most people said, great idea. Good for you. I'll get that cane out when I need to, or I'm not there yet. Well, I bet this is a question you deal with a lot in your line of work. When is your yet? When will that old be a category into which some part of you, for some part of your life, some part of your identity, and perhaps, I don't want to say disabled because it's a binary, right? But we're all less able than we were when we were 20, right? We all have reduced physical function. When are we going to acknowledge that acting preventatively will serve our long-term interests? Odds are.
Yeah, well, you know how people are. It's a human nature, as you mentioned. We sometimes associate these aids, if you want to call them aids, or I don't want to call it a crutch, just for, there are many better words to use, but people don't look at those things as independence. They look at them as anti-independence. And
that's exactly backwards. That's exactly backwards.
It's completely backwards.
I write in this post, I had to get over it, but I find with a cane, I am more confident. I stand up straighter because I'm not looking at where my feet are. The cane gives me that information. People get out of my way, so I'm less likely to have to sort of, tense up a little. Like if you're negotiating in there, I live in New York City, so there's sidewalks and they can get crowded. So I walk more and with more confidence. It's not about walking less. It's about, or moving less. It's about enabling more safe movement. And that we all know. I mean, I'm not a gym goer. I'm not going to become one at 73, but I walk a lot and I want to continue to walk and be mobile. And the cane makes me feel safer and more relaxed, which took me completely by surprise. I had no idea. I'm like, I have to walk the walk, pun intended. I have to set a good example. And I was not so happy about it. And I really like it.
Yeah. Listen, I'm 56 years old. I have some balance issues as well. And, you've actually kind of made a good point because from a fashion standpoint, there's some really great things out there, like depending on what it is you're into and whatever that, are a great thing that can also be functional. Plus, if anybody ever pisses you off, Santiago, right? You hit them with it, right? Anyway, that's maybe, they just whack them or whatever. You know what? 1 in 5 people report age discrimination, ageism in the healthcare settings. And also, the U.S. economy is set back about $63 billion per year, an AARP statistic, by ageism. Shed a little bit of light on those two things.
I will give credit for that $63 billion statistic where it is due, which is to a fantastic researcher based at Yale named Becca Levy, who has done almost all, not all. Again, another sign that we're making headway against ageism is there's more and more researchers studying and adding their findings to the accumulation of evidence that shows how attitudes towards aging affect our physical health and our cognitive health. Levy came up with that. She is the author of a book about how your minds and bodies, how your attitude towards aging determines how well and how long you will live. You can, again, to pimp old school, off which I make no money, Old School Hub. If you cannot find anything or want to know where to find anything I reference, go to Old School Hub, search for Levy, you'll find her book. It's called Breaking the Age Code. Her finding is based on the fact that because we are in denial that we are aging, we might not seek out healthcare. And it's all about preventive medicine. Some of it is about, preventative healthcare, which of course is not lucrative. It's slow. It's gradual. It's un-American. It takes work. It takes time. And that if we took better care of our bodies as they age, and to echo an idea that's already come up, the earlier in life you start doing that, you go, oh, I might become that little old lady. And it probably would make sense to start taking care of my health earlier on rather than wait till I get some scary blood test in my 50s and so on. So that ageism in healthcare, as everywhere, has two components, just to oversimplify slightly. How we feel about getting older. If you say, well, at my age, that's just going to happen. You're wrong, because there are other people who have that symptom or that ache and that pain younger than you are. And there are other people your age and way older who never have it. It is never about age. So when we say, this is just a function of getting old, and don't look at the symptom or don't improve the behavior, try to improve the behavior that is perhaps diet, whatever, that is somewhat responsible for that symptom or problem, physical problem, mental problem. Old people respond every bit as well to psychotherapy, by the way. Complete myth that we don't learn, that we're stuck in our ways and so on. So many myths. So that's part of it, is your own attitude, self-defeating stereotypes, part of the problem, but also there is always a systemic or institutional component. Medicine, I think it's only 10% or something, don't quote me, of American medical schools even require a rotation, which means I think 4 or 6 weeks of your entire medical education studying the ways in which aging affects the human body. And guess what? Most people in hospitals that they are going to encounter, unless they're pediatricians, are going to be older. And you have a lot of doctors who make the same ageist assumptions as their patients do, which is, of course, you're old and of course your body's falling to shit. And that's a function of age rather than of something diagnosable and almost always treatable.
Listen, if you swing a hammer for your whole life, okay, you will have shoulder problems when you get older, right? It's not because you got older that you have the shoulder problem. I mean, it's the same kind of what you're getting
It's not
at.
not. I mean, it's both. It's
it
both and.
Absolutely. So,
and other people, I mean, I happen to have had my left shoulder replaced. Arthritis. I don't play tennis. I don't swing a hammer. It's not even my dominant hand. But young people have arthritis too, especially athletes. So that's a good example. Most diseases are not age-based. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, the ones we hear about a lot because they're awful and they're scary, and it's reasonable that we're afraid and apprehensive about them. But again, it's not aged. You can't say most 73-year-olds don't need their shoulders replaced, right? It's utterly individual.
You mentioned Becca before, and she's, cites a lot, a great, look into her. Great. I mean, just for the listeners, look into Becca. But one of the things that she mentioned is the correlation between, negative views, before you mentioned about, it's about how we react to things, about how we perceive things and those things. That's the context. But there's actually a connection between how long you live and the view that you have, whether positive or negative, about aging. What about that?
It was one of her very first studies. I think it's a good 15 or 20 years old. And she established, and when she does, let me tell you, I am very careful about the research that I cite. And I've known Becca, as a colleague for many years. And I remember saying to her, I wish you'd write about ageism because that is at the heart of this, how we think about and conceive of our own aging. And she took her time because she's an academic, not a firebrandy activist like me. But boy, when she wrote that book, Breaking the Age Code, did she ever do it? I'll repeat the subtitle again. How your beliefs about aging determine how long and how well you will live. She talks about positive age beliefs playing the most important role. I prefer, this is a little nitpicky, but I prefer to say accurate age beliefs or fact rather than fear-based beliefs about aging. Because I don't like this whole, positive spin. Attitude does matter, helps to be an optimist, helps to not be in chronic pain or whatever. But it is the more you learn about aging, the less fear it holds, partly for the sort of sad-ass reason that our fears are what we hear about in the media, but our fears are so out of proportion to reality. And that fear is bad for us. That fear divides us. That fear makes us afraid, and fear causes inflammation. And they think that's the reason for this age gap. If I may, I would love to just read one sentence. Again, if you go to my blog and don't want to hunt around the internet, if you go to Old School, you'll find this stuff. But on my blog, thischairrocks.com/blog, the latest post is about Levy's latest finding, which is about something called mild cognitive impairment, which may or may not be a thing depending on who you talk to. But I would say, it's perhaps when you are slightly confused or you have trouble, which we all do. Just about 20% of the population escapes this entirely. Most of us lose some of the processing capacity that it helps us remember the name of the movie we saw with what's her name last week. But guess what? Young people can't remember it either. And her new study, shows that, and I'll just quote one sentence, the predominant narrative of aging as a time of inevitable and universal decline needs to be reconsidered. What we found is that improvement in later life, and she's talking about cognitive functioning, not just that having more accurate age beliefs staves off and protects against cognitive decline, but that if you learn more and your attitude becomes more accurate and more positive, it actually reverses mild cognitive decline. Sorry, that was me talking, not her. I'll just finish her quote. What we found is that improvement in later life is not rare. It is common, and it should be included in our understanding of the aging process, which is why one of the many reasons I could never be an academic, but I do like that term. The idea, and I think it's a really good example of how ageism and attitudes towards age and aging affect us across our lifespan. Chrononormativity is the punishing notion, first of all, that there's a norm. And of course, there's no such thing as norms, especially in view of the really important fact that the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. Every newborn is unique, but 17-year-olds have way more in common socially, physically, developmentally than 47-year-olds and so on out. So the idea that you get old and you form this homogeneous mass could not literally be further from the truth, biologically, socially, whatever. Chrononormativity is the idea that by a certain age or at a certain age, we should have accomplished certain things, or our body should work in certain ways. And you see it a lot. You have a baby and you're like, oh, it's 3 months old and he hasn't, burped 6 times in a row yet. He's 7 months old. He's not sitting up, or he should be sitting up. And even at that early stage where you could say, yes, it's much easier to extrapolate about, milestones of physical and verbal prowess early on. Even then, they are not our friends. They set up this false ideal to which many people, if you're born with a disability, you may never sit up by yourself. Doesn't mean you're, not a valued human being who can go on to have a fascinating life and so on. But then extending on out that you should, be married by a certain age, that you should have children by a certain age, that you should start saving for your 401k at a certain age. And these are very narrow, middle class, white examples that I'm giving you. But that idea is never helpful. It's punitive, and it advantages. It's all these ideas of a norm are cooked up by inevitably the majority, who tend to be the people with the most money and the most representation in society, so they consign everyone else to the margins. And as older people, we become increasingly consigned to the margins by that narrative. And but it's punishing when you're young too, especially now that everything in the labor market is getting shaken up. I have a friend in the business, an oldness business, who has his website is called Stage Not Age. Because you might start a family even as a woman, a biological woman. You might have your first kid in your 60s now, 50s, right? That's an extreme example, but you could certainly become a new parent across a multi-decade stretch, right? And that's a new stage of life. You might start a new career at 60 and be in a field with lots of younger people, or vice versa. You might be a young person entering a field where everyone is older than you. You are still new to that. So chrononormativity is unhelpful, and it's a way in which it measures our progress and our productivity on terms that most of us did not come up with and that do not have our best interests at heart.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it's you're right. You get to a spot where expected to retire. Then there's other people who will work until they'll die with their tool in their hand, and stuff like that, and having the childbearing years and all that. And I feel like it's like you're in the play, and this is the act that you're doing now because of your age.
That's a good analogy, right? Here's the 3 stages.
Yeah, it's like, and that's
here's the script, and if you don't follow the script, you're screwing up.
You're not living well. You're not aging well because you didn't retire, right? Like not given the fact that there could be so many reasons for it, right? So it's kind of a narrowing of the thought process. And
again, that variation increases with age. We grow more different. With the choices we made early on have effects, positive and negative, that we could not possibly have anticipated early on, or luck. Something happens, we got to move, or we win the lottery.
And I also feel like the same, that same 40-year span, when you look at, people put everybody in the basket, right? And if they say that person is old, in their mind, depending on where they are in their age and their context, that 40-year period is the same for those people as it might not be the same, when you're younger. Yeah, what about
No, not
that?
only is it not the same, Paul, it's way more diverse. There is way more diversity. Heterogeneity, is the wonky way that gerontologists say.
Here now, Santiago.
Ready? Brace yourself. Hold on. The defining characteristic of late life is heterogeneity, right? So if you look at everyone, heterogeneity, difference, variation, diversity. And if you look at the population of people in senior housing who may be, let's say they're aged 50 to 90, 50 to 100, they are way, way, way more different from each other than a group of 10 to 50-year-olds.
And also like the younger kids, right? Like you look at them all and they all have that ostrich haircut, Santiago, right? And I know I get silly with it, but I mean, yeah, you're so right. I mean, the way you put that to me, like, I don't know, it kind of gives me the hairs to stand
That's
up.
That's good. Yay, I made your hair stand up.
Yes. Listen, nobody told you that today, Ashton, before I told you. So,
but I think it's a really, really, really important fact. And part of becoming an old person in training is to look at the older people around you instead of past them, right? Instead of treating us as invisible, not just to say, oh, I hope I, am going to the gym like that, or making fabulous meals, or entertaining, or whatever, but also for behaviors that you don't want to emulate, right? That we look at and learn from the older people around us in order to inform and guide the choices that we make.
Is it possible, though, that there's a little overkill here in terms of, like, just as an example, like, how do we talk about something like fall prevention without unintentionally reinforcing, like the stereotype of frailty and, like, older people or whatnot? I feel like we're always like banging this drum. Can we do a disservice to it by, harping on it so much that, it becomes almost that in and of itself? I mean, I don't want to go too deep on it, but
that's a good question. I think, in my universe, once I'm the boss of everything, facts will change people's minds. Wouldn't that be great? And bias is irrational. And when people are afraid, they hear what they want to hear. I am sure you are good at telling stories about people who did a thing and were glad they had. So I suspect that's the way to do it. And also to provide information to people in lots of different forms so that they can pick and choose. I mean, not to elevate my own importance, but that is why I wrote that post about starting to use a cane, was to say, hey, I did this thing. It was really hard. The biggest obstacle was my own ego. And here are all the reasons it has surprised me about how much I like it. I hope that will get 3 people out of 3 million to, use a cane before they fall and break their hip and have to use a cane for the rest of their lives. And associate, I guess here's an important idea. I associate the cane with mobility and with being able to go further. I mean, I intend to attend a demonstration later in the month. Shocker, I've been doing that all my life. I feel safer in the crowd with the cane. First of all, if I'm not looking at my feet and there's a pothole, I'm less likely to literally to fall. But also people give me a little more space. And those things make me more likely to go out and more safe when I do. So I think to see it as a way to liberate yourself, but more than I do, it's your line of work, that it is hard to get people to prepare for our future. It's hard to get people to put money in savings accounts. It's hard to get people to do wills. It's hard to get people to sign medical powers of attorney and all those things. And they make sense. And the thing that people don't expect is that the minute you do it, you feel better. The worst part is all the, beforehand, I'm putting my hands in my ears and drumming my feet on the ground. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it.
No,
and that resistance is itself oppressive and demoralizing and stress inducing.
So this has gone so fast, and I want to invite you, Ashton, to come on our podcast anytime. Anytime you have the, you're welcome here anytime at A&J Studios with Santiago and myself. But as we get down to the end here, one very important thing I want to ask you is that where should ageism advocates, ageism advocates focus their energy over, like, say, the next decade? You wrote the book in 2016. It's been 10 years, right? What are we focusing on? Is it policy reform? Is it, cultural change, community design? What's the next 10 years going to be for us in the ageism field?
It depends. Are you a community designer? Do you work in healthcare? Are you trying to keep an older friend, company and as active as they can be? Aging touches, the reason for me that it's so interesting, because I'm a generalist, is that it touches on every aspect of society, every aspect of being human. And we're each going to go in through the gateway, if you will, that matters most to us in that moment. So if that means writing letters to your congressman to fund the Elder Justice Act or AARP's POATA Act, which is Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act, if that's the kind of thing you like to do that. If you are concerned about your own aging, the most important component of a good old age is to have a solid social network. Really, really important to make friends of all ages. That is an anti-ageist act. So think of something you like to do and find a mixed age group to do it with. One more suggestion is to try to break the habit, which we all have, zero judgment around any of this, to make a beeline for people your own age when you enter the room, when you get to a meeting, when you plan a social event. Mix it up. You don't have to be a full-time anti-ageism activist like me. The world would be intolerable if we're made of activists. But you can't start. Ashton. You can't start too small, and you can't start too late. Right? Just by rethinking your own attitudes. Why do you feel the way you do about getting older, and where do the messages come from that tell you to be afraid and apprehensive, and what purpose do they serve? And start small and keep going.
That's great advice. And I know you all during our podcast session here today mentioned and dropped the websites, the emails, stuff like that. But I want to tell the listeners out there that Ashton, the person you're looking at in front of me, you could just put her name in the search engine, okay, and you will come up, okay, with enough content, okay, where you can pretty much watch the content, okay, for 24, 48 hours without stopping.
Oh God, don't do that.
Drink, go to the bathroom, or whatever, right? And she's there. And so, look,
or go to oldschool.info.
Yeah,
it's all in one place.
Oldschool.info. And it's all in one place. But the one thing I want to ask you is really not related to ageism or healthcare or anything like that. Is your appearance doing a TED Talk? Now, for me, that's what. Growing up as my idol was John Facenda. I'm a voiceover actor, narrator. I love to do public speaking. And if you put gun to my head and told me, bucket list, right? It's doing a TED Talk. Is doing a TED Talk as sexy, okay, as they say, or as it appears?
I backed into this as I back into everything. People say, "Oh, you must be an extrovert. You must be a performer." I am neither. When I speak and write because it seems to me that I have something that is important to say for the world. So in a sense, I feel like I'm a vessel for it. I hope that doesn't sound pretentious. I mean it as the opposite. Doing a TED Talk was terrifying. I had the ill fortune to TED starts on Sunday night, basically, and it runs through till Friday morning. My talk was not slated till Thursday night. So I'm in this big thing in Vancouver with 1 million famous people, but no one knows who I am. And you're supposed to go up and talk to people famous or not famous or whatever. And that's not my forte. So I spent the entire week in agony. But I will say that by the time my slot came, also you can use notes. They can't physically keep you from doing it, but I'm not an actor, right? I'm a writer. So when I speak, I do have notes. I often extemporize. I'm not a wooden speaker, but to go out there and not have a script was terrifying. But by the time my time came, I was so desperate to get this over. I would have gone out there naked. And I nailed it. Listen, I got a standing O. It's a really, really, really good talk. And I strongly recommend everyone watch it.
So it's 11 minutes and 27 seconds long, Santiago. And it's great. Ashton is a funny, engaging, smart, wonderful person. You could tell this when you come across really great. I'm not just trying to butter you up. I mean, the interview's over. You already came on. But I watched all your stuff and I'm a fan. And I think that if you're a listener and you're watching this podcast, just type Ashton Applewhite into your search engine. Okay,
I always know when people say I didn't know how to find you, or like how it's like you didn't try very hard because I am the only person with my name.
If you can't find Ashton Applewhite, I don't know.
You're not trying.
Also, listen, you're not trying. And I just appreciate your graciousness to come on. I'm basically a nobody over here. And, just so gracious of you to come on. And you're so professional. I appreciate it so much. Please come back anytime, okay?
My pleasure. Thank you for this, Paul.
You got it. You're welcome. Thanks, Ashton.
Thank you.
The Agewise Podcast is brought to you by 101 Mobility in North Jersey. They treat your patients with respect and dignity. You can reach them at 973-658-5100. You can also reach the Agewise Institute at theagewiseinstitute.org.